Motorsport TV Live, brought to you by Motorsport Tickets, the dedicated motorsport experiences provider.
Hello and welcome to Motorsport TV Live. I'm Diana Binks. Coming up today, we'll be looking back at the 2021 Australian Supercar season and in particular the dominance of Shane van Gisbergen, who looked to be unbeatable from day one. We'll have insight from Motorsport.com's Australian editor Andrew van Leeuwen, and we'll take a look at what we can expect from the 2022 season as the Gen 3 cars prepare to take to the racetrack for the first time. That's all coming up right here on Motorsport TV Live. Shane van Gisbergen was the name on everybody's lips at the start of the season and dominated the series from race one. Even with a broken collarbone, the 888 driver was unbeatable going on to wrap up the championship with a round to spare. Shane took some time out to speak to Motorsport TV Live about his Supercar season.
It's been an awesome year. I've had a lot of fun on and off track, and yeah, the season's gone very well. We sort of tapered off results-wise in the last couple of rounds, but did what we had to do to secure the championship, I guess. We got halfway through the year, I think this year, before it sort of shut down, and we were on hiatus for I guess 2.5, 3 months without racing, and then we had to race at the same track 4 times in a row and be New South Wales based and race there. But you know, now we're finished for the year. I can't go home to New Zealand. It's still shut off to us. So. Bit of a shame how it's still affecting us 2 years later, but it is what it is. We just made less mistakes. There was a few guys who had changed teams, and the other top guys who had stability, they made a lot of errors early in the season. So we just kept scoring the points. When we couldn't win, we were on the podium or top 5. That was our goal, just to be there every race. If we couldn't win, we had to make the most out of every day, and I think we did that all year pretty much, apart from 1 or 2 races that we made errors in. Otherwise, you know, it was pretty good all year. After the first round, I had a crash on a mountain bike and did my left collarbone and 3 ribs. And I didn't know about the ribs at the time when I did the race 2 weeks later, but I was in a fair bit of pain. And then, yeah, sure enough, found out the week after I'd done 3 ribs. But it is what it is. It was a bit of a hassle for the first half of the year racing with the plate as well, where the belts would sit. It was quite annoying and it would dig in. So now I've got the plate out, I feel a lot better. Our cars have steadily got quicker over the years, and it's mainly from aerodynamics, and it's made the cars a lot harder to follow. And actually it was surprising this year in the TRS cars, you could follow just as close, if not closer than the V8. So it's a real shame that the cars have gotten quicker, but the racing suffered. So for me, which it seems like they've done, they've cut all the downforce basically off the cars. So you should be able to follow a lot closer and be pressuring someone lap after lap. You know, that's when I first started in the series. That's what it was all about. You could follow someone nose to tail and pass them however you wanted, or that pass you. The battles were just epic, and we've kind of lacked that a little bit the last few years. So I'd really like it to get, you know, the technology keep advancing, but the aerodynamics creep back so we can keep racing each other.
Shane van Gisbergen there, and he wasn't the only big news this year. Much like every racing series, the Supercar season was once again badly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. With rounds postponed and teams worried that they'd get locked down on the wrong side of the state lines, race dates were in constant flux. Auckland and Perth are amongst dates that ended up being dropped as the calendar was shuffled and changed in an attempt for Supercars to meet its broadcast contract requirements. The season culminated in a quadruple header at Sydney Motorsport Park, including 3 sprint rounds and 4 night races ahead of the flagship Bathurst 1000. The Great Race was also a casualty of the calendar changes being moved from its early October slot until the first week of December. But when it did finally take to the track, it was Chaz Mostert who showed dominant pace. The 29-year-old combined with teammate Lee Holdsworth to take the win for Walkinshaw and Andretti United. McLaren boss Zak Brown, part owner of the team, even took to Twitter after the race, offering Mostert the chance to drive his Alan Moffat Chevrolet Monza sports sedan from his private collection. An offer which Mostert promptly accepted, but only on the condition that Alan Moffat's son James Moffat, who finished second at Bathurst, also got a shot behind the wheel. Well, joining me now to talk more about Shane van Gisbergen and all of this season's top stories is Motorsport.com's Australian editor, Andrew van Leeuwen. Andrew, let's start by talking about the season, but if I could start with Shane van Gisbergen. I mean, he's quite special. He broke his collarbone at the beginning of the season, but he went on to dominate this year. What are your views on that?
Yeah, look, I think Shane sort of showed, you know, once again that he is a world-class driver. He's a remarkable driver. He really made the Supercars field look fairly average this year, and they're not average. There's a bunch of really good drivers, you know, some of the best drivers outside of Formula One in the world racing Supercars, but they just had no chance against Shane this year. As you mentioned, the broken collarbone, that was sort of the biggest threat to his title campaign. He went out, won the first 2 races of the season at Mount Panorama, and then 2 weeks to the day before the next race of the season at Sandown, he fell off his mountain bike, broke his collarbone, was rushed into surgery. It just seemed impossible that he was going to be fit to race at Sandown. He told a few little fibs about how well he was feeling to talk the team into letting him race. He qualified 17th for his first race on his comeback, and everyone was saying, oh, this is a terrible idea. You know, he's back in the midfield. He's going to have a crash. He's going to injure himself and put him out for the season. And he drove through the field and won the race because he's Shane van Gisbergen, and that's exactly what he does. Probably one of the greatest Supercars drives that we've ever seen. Nobody had ever won a single driver sprint race from that far back on the grid. And that was it. I really feel like that was the day that everyone else went, okay, we're not going to beat this bloke this year. He's just in a different class, you know. So that was part of a run of 6 race wins to start the season. 7 if you include the Bathurst 1000, which was the season ender in 2020. He won the New Zealand Grand Prix. He'd won some GT races. He won the Bathurst 6 hour not long after breaking his collarbone. Like, he was just in remarkable form to start the season. And the funny thing is, after Sandown, they discovered 3 broken ribs as well, which he didn't know about or didn't tell anyone about before he went to Sandown. And he actually said at the end of the year that was a big turning point as well, because if they'd found those broken ribs before Sandown, the Supercars medical delegate would have almost definitely not let him race that weekend, you know. And that, you know, he won the championship with more than a round to spare, but you know, it came at a time where momentum was key for Shane and all that sort of stuff. So one of those seasons that it wasn't a classic season in terms of a title fight, but it was just, you just had to sit back and go, wow, look at this guy go.
He clearly deserved it after all of that. But let me talk about, obviously, Anton de Pasquale and Will Brown and Chaz Mostert. I mean, strong performances from these guys. What can we expect next year?
I feel like there is potential for some of those guys to really stand up next year. Particularly, Chaz Mostert's the really interesting one now, because we haven't seen a driver dominate the Bathurst 1000 with car speed the way that he and Lee Holdsworth did a couple of weekends ago, or a week and a half ago now, like that for a very, very long time. You know, I think it was one of the first times ever that, you know, someone took pole, fastest lap of the race and won the race. You know, it's normally a race where other factors play a part, but their speed was just unbeatable. And he was, you know, he was racing Shane and driving away from him. So that's exciting when you see that. And we've sort of seen a lot of potential from that Walkinshaw Andretti United squad. They've hired Nick Percat for next season, so they mean business. They're going to have 2 top drivers in their team, so that gives a bit of hope that we could see a title fight next year. Anton de Pasquale, his form in Sydney was fantastic. You know, he sort of has taken over from Scott McLaughlin at DJR, Dick Johnson Racing. It's taken some time for that relationship to kind of really start to work, but it seems that he's figured that car out and he's learned how to go quick in it. So every indication that, you know, Anton could be right in the fight next year. And then Will Brown, that's a really interesting one. He's had a brilliant end to the season, took his first race win in Sydney. He was on provisional pole at Bathurst. He took a pole in Sydney as well. You know, a lot of people, and I'll put myself in that camp, didn't give Erebus Motorsport much of a fight this year after some massive changes in the off-season heading into 2021. They've just been incredible. They got 2 great young drivers, Will and Brody Kostecki. But Will just sort of edging it late in the year, and just the guy that was taking the headlines, and you know, a great personality. Could be a fantastic personality / talent for Supercars. So there's some positive signs. They've still got a lot to do to beat Shane next season, because he's Shane and he does Shane things and he's very hard to beat. But some positive signs. You know, like I said, there's guys starting to maybe look at Shane and go, okay, we see where the level is now. Now we can clearly see. Now he's on his own. We can clearly see where he is and where we are. Let's go there. Let's go there and race him. And, you know, fingers crossed that's what we're going to see.
Now, you mentioned the Bathurst 1000 and Lee Holdsworth won that event, but it took him 18 starts to finally get that checkered flag and the top step on the podium. What is it about that race event that makes it so special?
Well, it's our Monaco Grand Prix. It's the Indy 500. You know, in Australia, that this is our big race, and it's a very interesting question. One of the most interesting questions you can ask an Australian racing driver is: would you rather win the Supercars Championship or win the Bathurst 1000? Because the Bathurst 1000 is a pretty big prize, and as you know, Lee kind of touched on it. So, you know, to give it a bit of context, Lee was a full-time driver in the championship for many, many years, a race winner. Found himself without a drive quite unexpectedly at the end of last season when Tickford scaled back to 3 cars, took up a co-driving role with Walkinshaw Andretti United, and now he's a Bathurst 1000 winner. And, you know, he said on Sunday night after winning Bathurst, this was better than sitting in an average car for a whole season. You know, I'd rather show up to one race and be in a good car and go and win it. So that's what winning the Bathurst 1000 really means to drivers. You know, for Lee to be able to call himself a Bathurst 1000 winner, that's something nobody will ever take away from him. And that's something very special. Chaz is a 2-time Bathurst 1000 winner now. He'd already won it once before, but the way he won this race was just exceptional. So I think this one would really mean something to him as well. So it's a massive thing. Lee Holdsworth is one of the nicest blokes you'll ever meet. I think you just couldn't, if you can't be happy to see Lee Holdsworth win the Bathurst 1000, then you just can't be happy, because it was a nice thing happening to a nice guy. So it was a great result from in that respect. But their car speed was amazing. You know, Chaz did the fastest ever lap in a supercar around Mount Panorama in the shootout, and he kind of got out and said, okay, well, you know, when he was asked about how the lap, he said, no, it was kind of pretty easy because the car is just so good. The walls feel like they're a long way back, which was pretty telling. And on the Sunday, just so much speed. So if Walkinshaws can bottle that speed, if they can work out what it was, because that has been their issue in the past, they go quick, and then at the end of the weekend, they don't quite know why, and that's not good. If they can work it out and they can bottle it, Chaz could be, it's going to really be one to watch next year for sure.
And Jamie Whincup retiring, he'll be sadly missed.
He will be. You know, he's been a fantastic champion for the sport, 7 times champion. He leads the way in race wins, poles, fastest laps, pretty much everything. You know, he's known as having this kind of, I've been no good at the Bathurst 1000. He won the thing 4 times, so he wasn't exactly terrible at that. Some other guys have won it more, but absolutely remarkable career. Brilliant driver, still a brilliant driver this year. Definitely got outclassed by Shane van Gisbergen. You could tell that he wasn't quite at that same level for whatever reason. Probably a bit distracted about the fact that he's going to be the managing director of the team, not the lead driver, or not, sorry, one of the category's leading drivers next year. But yeah, look, he's just been brilliant, and he's been a great champion for the sport. Bit polarizing. I've never quite understood why, because he's actually a heck of a nice bloke. But I guess with that much success, you're going to rub some people the wrong way, as we've seen in other categories. Brilliant champion of the sport. Still going to be hanging around as the boss at Triple Eight. He will almost definitely race in the Bathurst 1000 as a co-driver next year. And what was really promising at Bathurst this year, the guy that's replacing him, the teenager, Brock Feeney, put in a brilliant performance in the 3rd Triple Eight car. So I think there's a bit of excitement around there's a bit of new blood coming into the championship. That's what Jamie wanted. He always said, I don't want to hold up a spot that a young driver can have. He's got a young driver coming in, the freshly crowned Super 2 champion, who crashed out of the Bathurst 1000, but, crashed out running in the top 10 and really holding his own with the big boys. So exciting times at that team. And it'll be fascinating to see how Jamie goes in that team boss role. But he's so analytical, and he's so, he thinks things through so precisely. I think it's really going to suit him to be the boss of that team.
And Andrew, if we could just talk briefly, I know we've talked about it constantly during the season, you know, the disruption to the season because of COVID-19. How much effect did that have on teams and on drivers? Because obviously commercially, you know, we're running commercial businesses here. What impact has that had?
It's had a huge impact, you know, for the second year running. We kind of started off, you know, feeling like things were getting back to normal. There was a time around, you know, the early rounds, Sandown, Tasmania, even right up to sort of Hidden Valley, where things felt pretty normal. Most of the internal borders in Australia were open. We were all sort of traveling around going, okay, maybe we're out of the woods. And then there was an outbreak in Sydney that ended up going on for many months. And there was an outbreak in Melbourne, a second major outbreak in Melbourne. And that just slowed the season, you know. So even around for Townsville, we had teams, the Melbourne teams had to be on the road for, you know, 3 or 4 weeks to get that. Even before Darwin, I think it was before Darwin, they had to do 2 weeks in New South Wales. I'm losing track of who had to do what this season because it's just been non-stop. But, you know, before Darwin, Melbourne teams, we were on the road for 100 days last year. They were on the road for another 3 weeks to get that round done. And then we had the Queensland teams who had generally got away with things fairly well throughout the pandemic. They had to spend 6 weeks on the road. In fact, today was the first day they were allowed back into Queensland from New South Wales. So from after the Bathurst 1000. So they basically came down at the end of October and they went home today. So to get through the Sydney Motorsport Park and then the Bathurst 1000. And they had to get those rounds done because, you know, there's a $200 million broadcast agreement in place with Fox Sports and Channel 7 that says each season we need to deliver 12 events, you know. So they had to get, we were at 7 after Townsville. They had to get another 5 events done. It had to happen. All the teams were going to miss out on a lot of money. And the Bathurst 1000 is just not negotiable. It has to happen. And teams go and sign commercial agreements with sponsors. And the agreement is, you know, in some cases, it's almost like the sponsor is sponsoring the team for the Bathurst 1000 and they take the other 11 events as kind of a bonus chucked in, you know. So if that event didn't happen, even if they did 12 other, you know, they managed to get to 12 events and not have Bathurst, you'd have sponsors saying, great, we'll take a portion of our money back. Thank you. Because we were in this for the Bathurst 1000 and it didn't happen. So that event had to happen. It was complicated this year by New South Wales being the centre of an outbreak. Last year it was Victoria and it didn't impact Bathurst as much, but New South Wales is open for business. They're getting on with life, sort of living with COVID. The season got done. The teams have all still survived. They're still going. We've got there, you know, it looks like by Western Australia today has announced that February 5, they'll open the border. That'll be one of the last ones and we're all going to get on with it. So I'm based in Perth and WA's borders have been an absolute nightmare for me this year. So that's good news for me. I might actually get to go to a few more races next year and hopefully we're going to go in and we're going to have a fairly normal season because everyone needs it. Australia's a big country. We all travel a lot to take part in this sport, and these complications of closed borders and stuff just puts so much pressure on staff and families and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Fingers crossed a good year next year.
It's been difficult for everyone for sure, but yes, as you say, let's get on with next year. Very briefly, what can we expect?
It's going to be an interesting year. One thing, it's the farewell of the current generation cars. The Gen 3 cars will debut at the start of the 2023 season. So, you know, these cars have served us very well for a very long time. So there'll be a bit of sadness, I think, when we get to the end of the season. There's a new chapter coming. The Gen 3 cars were unveiled in Bathurst. You know, they look cool. They sound cool. They're meant to be much easier to race. You know, guys will be able to race each other door to door better. They're going to be cheaper for the teams. But, you know, they are a radical shift away from our current cars. So it's going to be one of those kind of, an end of an era for supercars next season. So that'll be interesting. And then, like I say, it's just the young talent. It's going to be a classic, you know, can the young talent take it to the established guy, Shane Van Gisbergen, and can, you know, guys like Chaz Mostert and Cam Waters step up? That's really the big question. We sort of thought Cam Waters might do it this year. He was so quick at the back end of 2020. Didn't quite get there this year, but he's going to want to say, hang on, no, I can be there and I can be a contender. You know, Chaz is going to be right there. It's going to be interesting. And the one good thing about having someone like Shane Van Gisbergen in the championship is that even if he does go and dominate again, you know, he's just so spectacular to watch. You know, he's just, the way he drives the car is brilliant. So it's hard to get bored of him, even when he's winning. I'm sure there's 20 4 other drivers that would disagree with me, but from the sidelines, it's still fun to watch, even when he's doing a lot of winning.
Well, we absolutely look forward to next season getting underway and getting that competition element back on track. But for the moment, Andrew, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, that's all we've got time for. Thanks to Shane van Gisbergen and Andrew van Leeuwen. I'm Diana Binks. Join us again here on Motorsport TV Live for more season reviews and roundups. See you soon. Bye-bye.